Chapter 1. A Quiet Morning Interrupted. Chief Daniel Harper of the bustling town of Willow Creek was savoring a rare morning off. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden hue over the quiet neighborhood. Daniel sat on his porch, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, enjoying the crisp autumn air and the gentle hum of the waking world. Birds chirped in the distance, and the occasional rustle of leaves added to the serene atmosphere. It was a perfect morning, until it wasn't. From the corner of his eye, Daniel noticed two men walking down the street. They were dressed in cheap, ill-fitting uniforms that screamed fake authority. One carried a clipboard like it was a shield of power, while the other was snapping pictures of random houses with his phone. Daniel raised an eyebrow, his instincts as a seasoned police chief kicking in. Something about these two didn't sit right with him. The men stopped in front of his driveway, where his unmarked government-issued car was parked. The one with the clipboard pointed at the vehicle and said something to his partner. Without hesitation, he pulled out a bright orange sticker and slapped it onto the windshield. Daniel leaned forward, squinting to read the notice from a distance. Violation, illegal parking. Vehicle subject to immediate removal. Daniel let out a short, incredulous laugh. They couldn't be serious. He had lived in this neighborhood for years, and the local homeowners association, HOA, wasn't particularly strict. Besides, his driveway was his property. Who the hell were these guys? Taking a slow sip of his coffee, Daniel decided to watch a little longer before making his move. He strolled down his porch steps, feigning casual curiosity. "Morning, fellas. Something wrong with my car?" he asked, his tone light but laced with suspicion. The man with the clipboard, a wiry guy with a thin mustache that looked like it had been drawn on with a pen, barely glanced at him. "Sir, this vehicle is in violation of HOA regulations and will be towed within the hour," he said with a rehearsed authority. Daniel blinked. "In my own driveway." The second man, shorter and stockier with sunglasses that were too big for his face, crossed his arms. "This is private community property, sir. The HOA has jurisdiction." Daniel almost laughed again. These guys had the confidence of con artists who had never been caught. Instead, he played along. "I wasn't aware of any new regulations." Mustache Man sighed dramatically, flipping through his clipboard as if he had a list of violations miles long. "They were recently updated. You should have received notice." Daniel shook his head. "Nope. Don't recall seeing anything." Sunglasses guy scoffed. "Then you weren't paying attention." That did it. The arrogance was almost impressive. Daniel folded his arms, tilting his head. "And you are?" Mustache Man said smoothly, flipping open a plastic badge holder. It was laughably fake. The HOA Compliance Division logo looked like it had been copied from a Google image search, and the badge itself was laminated like a kid's school project. Daniel smiled. "That's interesting because I know the real HOA board members. Never seen you two before." Sunglasses guy didn't flinch. "We've been contracted for enforcement. You'll need to pay a fine, or the vehicle goes." Daniel gave a slow nod, as if considering his options. Instead, he casually pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to his next-door neighbor, Tom, a retired detective with a sharp sense of humor. "Come outside. You need to see this." Then he looked back up and said, "Well, if there's a fine, I should probably get my wallet." Neither of them suspected a thing. Chapter 2. The tow truck arrives. A few minutes later, a tow truck rumbled into the neighborhood, rattling like it had just barely survived its last job. The driver, a gruff-looking man in a faded baseball cap, looked confused before he even stepped out. "You the one who called?" he asked, looking at the two supposed HOA officers. Mustache Man nodded. "Yeah, that's the car," he said, pointing at Daniel's vehicle. The driver scratched his beard. "What's the violation?" "Illegal parking," Sunglasses guy said. The driver squinted. "In his own driveway?" Mustache Man stiffened. "The HOA rules override personal property. Just hook it up." Daniel could see the hesitation on the tow driver's face. This guy might have taken some questionable jobs before, but even he seemed to recognize something was off. Deciding it was time for a little intervention, Daniel stepped forward. "Hey, buddy, quick question," Daniel said, his tone friendly but firm. "Do these guys look like legit HOA officers to you?" The tow driver frowned. "I mean, they got the shirts and all." Daniel nodded. "Sure, but they also just tried to find me without proof. Gave me a badge that looks like it came out of a cereal box, and now they're trying to tow my car from my own property." The tow driver blinked, then slowly turned back to the two men. "Wait a second. You guys are actually with the HOA, right?" Sunglasses guy's mouth opened, but nothing came out for a second. Then, in a forced tone, he said, "Of course we are." Daniel smiled. "Then you won't mind showing him some credentials." For a moment, everything was silent. Then Mustache Man reached into his pocket and pulled out his ID again, flipping it open. The tow driver leaned in, his eyes narrowing. Then he let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Man, this thing's faker than my ex's apology letters." Tom, who had finally made his way over, let out a loud chuckle from where he stood, arms crossed. "Oh, this is gold," he muttered under his breath. Mustache Man's face flushed red. "We don't have to prove anything to you," he snapped at the tow driver. The tow driver smirked, then took a slow step back. "You know what? I think I'm out of here." Sunglasses guy took a step toward him. "No, you were hired." "Yeah, and I was hired under the assumption this was legal." The driver shot back, already climbing into his truck. "I don't get paid enough for this crap." As the truck roared back to life and pulled away, Daniel decided now was the time for the real fun. With a slow, deliberate motion, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and flipped open his actual badge. The moment those gold letters glinted in the sunlight, both scammers froze. "Since you two seem to be real big on authority," Daniel said, his voice light and amused, "allow me to introduce myself. Daniel Harper, police chief." Sunglasses guy made a noise that sounded suspiciously like a squeak. "Now," Daniel continued, "before we go any further, let's have a little chat about impersonating an official, attempted fraud, and a couple of other things that are going to look real interesting on your rap sheet." Tom chuckled. "I'd say they're having a worse morning than you." Mustache Man swallowed hard, clearly realizing just how much trouble they were in. And judging by the way Sunglasses guy was shifting on his feet, Daniel had a feeling things were about to get even more entertaining. Chapter 3, The Ringleader Revealed. The tow truck hadn't made it far before the driver made the wise decision to get out of the situation. The scammers, however, had nowhere to go. Mustache Man and Sunglasses guy stood frozen, their bravado from earlier vanishing the second Daniel revealed his badge. Daniel let the silence stretch. He had dealt with plenty of criminals in his career, but there was something particularly satisfying about watching con artists realize they'd scammed the absolute wrong person. Sunglasses guy was the first to try and recover. "Listen, Chief Harper, right? This is all a big misunderstanding." "Oh, I don't think so," Daniel said, slipping his badge back into his pocket. "You two just attempted to tow my legally parked vehicle with no authority, issued a fraudulent fine, and impersonated HOA officers. Misunderstanding isn't the word I'd use." Mustache Man was still gripping his clipboard like it was a lifeline. We were just following orders." "From who?" Daniel asked, raising an eyebrow. The two exchanged a quick glance, but before either could answer, a new voice entered the scene. "You boys got a problem here?" A third man had appeared from further down the street, striding toward them with a confidence that didn't match the situation. He was older than the other two, mid-50s maybe, wearing a polo shirt tucked into cargo shorts and a Bluetooth headset in his ear. Daniel took one look at him and already knew this was the ringleader. Cargo Shorts shot a glare at his two lackeys before turning to Daniel with a forced smile. "I'm Jeff Simmons, head of the Compliance Division." Daniel smirked. "Compliance Division of what exactly?" "The Homeowners Association," Jeff said smoothly, adjusting his Bluetooth earpiece like that somehow gave him more credibility. "Impersonating HOA officers and attempting to tow cars off private property?" Daniel asked. "Interesting job description." Jeff's face darkened. "I don't know who you think you are, but—" Daniel cut him off with a grin. "Oh, I already introduced myself to your guys. Chief of Police. So now I'll ask again. Who are you?" For the first time, Jeff faltered. His jaw tightened, and his fingers twitched like he wanted to press his Bluetooth and call for backup. Too bad for him, no one was coming. Jeff recovered quickly, puffing out his chest and slipping into the aggressive corporate-style intimidation tactic Daniel had seen 100 times before. "I don't appreciate you interfering with an active enforcement action," he said, his voice dripping with manufactured authority. Daniel chuckled. That's funny because I don't appreciate con artists running a scam in my neighborhood. You're mistaken, Jeff shot back. Our firm has been contracted to ensure compliance with HOA rules. The board authorized us to issue citations and tow vehicles as necessary. Daniel tilted his head. You mean the same HOA board that's meeting at the clubhouse right now? Jeff blinked. That's right. Daniel continued, enjoying watching the scam unravel. I gave them a call while I was waiting for my neighbor here, he said, gesturing toward Tom, who was standing nearby with his arms crossed, grinning. And wouldn't you know it? Not a single board member has heard of you. Sunglasses Guy's face went pale. Wait, they haven't. Jeff shot him a look that clearly meant shut up before turning back to Daniel. They must be mistaken. Oh, I don't think so, Daniel said. And I'm guessing if I run your names through our system, I'll find a whole lot more than a mistake. That was when Sunglasses Guy did something truly stupid. Man, this is ridiculous, he muttered under his breath, taking a step back. Then another. Then he ran. It was almost comical how slow he was for someone attempting a full-blown escape. His footwork was terrible. He tripped on the curb almost immediately, stumbled forward, and barely managed to regain his footing. Daniel sighed. He didn't even need to chase him. Instead, he whistled sharply. From a nearby driveway, a deep bark rang out, followed by the rapid pounding of paws against pavement. Before Sunglasses Guy could make it 10 feet, a large, muscular Belgian Malinois sprinted past Daniel and closed the distance in seconds. The dog, Thor, belonged to one of Daniel's K-9 officers and had been resting in a patrol vehicle just a few houses away. Sunglasses Guy let out a high-pitched yelp and skidded to a stop as Thor snapped his teeth. Not biting, just warning. The man held up his hands. Okay, I'm done. Daniel whistled again, and Thor obediently backed off but kept his eyes locked on the scammer. Sunglasses Guy slumped to the ground, defeated. Meanwhile, Mustache Man had barely moved, too stunned to react. Jeff, on the other hand, had taken a step backward, calculating his own chances of escape. Daniel turned to him. Want to try your luck too, or are you ready to talk? Jeff lifted his chin. I want my lawyer. Daniel grinned. Oh, don't worry. You'll be getting one. Chapter 4, The Aftermath. As the Real HOA board members finally arrived, shocked and furious at what was happening, Daniel filled them in. These guys have been slapping fake citations on houses, issuing fake fines, and trying to tow cars, he explained. I'd guess they've been at this for a while. The board president, an older woman named Linda, turned to Jeff with fire in her eyes. You're not with us. We don't even hire outside compliance officers. Jeff was silent, probably trying to figure out his next move. Too bad for him. The next move was handcuffs. Daniel turned to Tom. Feel like making an arrest for old time's sake? Tom grinned and stepped forward. Oh, I thought you'd never ask. As Mustache Man and Sunglasses Guy were led to a squad car, Daniel took one last look at Jeff. The man's arrogance was gone, replaced by the realization that his scam had just collapsed around him. You really should have read the room, Daniel said casually. Might have saved you a felony charge or two. Jeff clenched his jaw but said nothing as he was loaded into the back seat. The neighborhood erupted into cheers. Residents had gathered, watching the spectacle unfold, and now they clapped and cheered for the unexpected takedown. Linda shook her head, still fuming. I can't believe this was happening under our noses. Daniel smiled, watching as the squad car pulled away. Well, at least now you won't have to deal with fake HOA cops anymore. Tom nudged him. And at least you won't have to worry about your car getting towed. Daniel chuckled. Yeah, too bad for them. I was the police. Chapter 5, Digging Deeper. With the scammers cuffed and loaded into the back of a squad car, the situation should have been wrapped up. But Daniel had been in law enforcement long enough to know that criminals like these rarely operated in a vacuum. There was always more to the story. As the neighborhood slowly returned to normal, he pulled aside one of the responding officers. Run their names. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. The officer nodded and headed back to his patrol car. Meanwhile, Tom leaned against Daniel's own vehicle with a smirk. I'd say that was a productive morning. Daniel shook his head. It's not over yet. A few minutes later, the officer returned, holding a tablet with a very interesting look on his face. Chief, you're going to want to see this. Daniel took the tablet and scanned the screen. What he found didn't surprise him. It just confirmed his suspicions. Both Jeff and Mustache Man had warrants. Jeff, the so-called ringleader, was already wanted in 2 different states for fraud-related charges, including running similar HOA scams in other neighborhoods. Mustache Man, whose real name was Richard Holt, had an outstanding warrant for identity theft. Sunglasses Guy, the one who had tried to run, was the only one without a warrant, but given the circumstances, he wasn't walking away from this either. Daniel let out a low whistle. Well, looks like we've got ourselves a professional operation. Tom peeked over his shoulder. Man, this dude's been pulling this scam all over the place. How has no one caught him before now? Daniel shook his head. Probably because most people don't fight back. They see an official-looking notice, get scared, and pay up. Linda, the HOA board president, stepped up beside them. So what happens now? Daniel looked at her. We dig deeper. Linda crossed her arms. Let me know if there's anything we can do to help. Daniel smiled. I'll hold you to that. Chapter 6. The Scam Unravels. Little did Daniel know, things were about to take another turn. Just as he was about to oversee the transport of the suspects, a call crackled over the radio. Dispatch to Chief Harper. He grabbed his radio. Go ahead. We've got an incident at the station involving one of your suspects. Daniel frowned. Already. The voice on the other end hesitated. Yeah. One of them tried to make a run for it. Tom let out a short laugh. Which one? Sunglasses Guy, the dispatcher confirmed. Daniel shook his head. Of course it was. According to the responding officers, the moment they got to the station, Sunglasses Guy had bolted out of the car the second the door opened. He made it all of 5 feet before a very unimpressed officer tackled him to the ground. Now he was facing even more charges. Daniel sighed. I swear, some of these guys watch too many movies. Tom clapped a hand on his shoulder. Hey, at least it wasn't your problem to chase him down this time. True, Daniel admitted, cracking a grin. But I don't think his day is getting any better. With that, he climbed into his vehicle and headed down to the station. Chapter 7. The Interrogation. By the time Daniel arrived, Jeff and Mustache Man had been processed and placed in holding cells. Sunglasses Guy was still sulking from his failed escape attempt, now with an extra set of zip ties on his wrists for good measure. Daniel stepped into the room where Jeff was being questioned. He didn't say anything at first, just leaned against the wall, watching the man across from him. Jeff exhaled sharply. Look, I want a deal. Daniel raised an eyebrow. A deal? You're in no position to be making demands. Jeff's jaw tightened, but he forced a smirk. I can tell you who else is in on this. Give you names. Bigger fish. Daniel tilted his head. Bigger fish. Jeff nodded. I'm not the only one running these operations. There's a network. You shut me down, someone else will pick it up. But if you let me walk, I'll give you everything you need to stop them. Daniel studied him for a long moment, then leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. You know what the problem with guys like you is, Jeff? Jeff stayed silent. You think you're the smartest person in the room, Daniel continued. You think everyone else is just a step behind. But here's the thing, you're not special. You're not even that good at this. Jeff scoffed. Oh, really? Daniel grinned. Yeah, because if you were, you wouldn't have been dumb enough to try and tow my car. Jeff's face twitched. Daniel stood up. Enjoy your time in jail. And don't worry, I'll find your bigger fish without you. With that, he walked out, leaving Jeff alone with his bad choices. Tom was waiting outside the room. So what did he offer? Nothing worth listening to, Daniel said. But now we know this scam goes deeper. Tom smirked. Think you'll track the rest of them down? Daniel chuckled. Oh, you can count on it. But for now, he had a neighborhood to get back to and a well-earned coffee to finish. Chapter 8. Justice Served. The investigation into Jeff's scheme unfolded faster than expected. With the HOA's cooperation, Daniel and his team dug into records, looking for any sign of how long this fake compliance racket had been going on. Turns out, it wasn't just their neighborhood. Jeff and his crew had been running this scam in multiple communities across the state, preying on homeowners who didn't know better. They'd issue fake violations, demand payments for bogus fines, and even tow cars illegally, then charge exorbitant fees for their return. Some people had paid hundreds, even thousands, just to avoid the hassle. Daniel shook his head as he flipped through the reports. It was one thing to run a con, but this was outright theft disguised as authority figures. Tom muttered beside him. These guys rely on intimidation. People see a notice that looks official, and they just assume it's real. They probably made a fortune. Daniel said, scrolling through the payment logs, but it's over now. Not only were Jeff and his crew facing felony fraud charges, but their scam had crumbled overnight. News outlets picked up the story, and suddenly, other victims started coming forward, eager to press charges. And just like that, the so-called compliance division was no more. The best part? Every single dollar they'd scammed from people was being tracked down. The courts would make sure it was returned. Daniel sat back in his chair, letting out a satisfied breath. Some days, justice didn't just work, it worked fast. Chapter 9, A Little Fun. With the case wrapped up, Daniel decided to have a little fun. A few days later, when the local news station came by to cover the takedown, he and Tom hatched a harmless prank. As the news crew set up in front of his house, Daniel casually strolled over and placed an official-looking violation notice on the reporter's car. The note, in bold red letters, read, "Violation, excessive news coverage. Vehicle subject to removal unless free coffee is provided to Chief Harper." He barely made it back to his porch before the reporter, a young guy named Jason, noticed. "Wait, what?" Jason squinted at the paper, then looked at Daniel, who sipped his coffee with a completely innocent expression. Tom, not nearly as subtle, burst into laughter. Jason read the fake ticket again, then groaned. "Oh, come on. I knew this was going to happen." Daniel grinned. "Hey, I'm just enforcing the rules." The prank got picked up in the evening broadcast, turning into an unexpected viral moment. Viewers loved seeing the police chief with a sense of humor, and the HOA takedown story gained even more traction because of it. Best of all, Jason actually did bring Daniel a cup of coffee the next time he stopped by for an interview. "Just keeping the peace," Daniel had joked as he took the cup. Chapter 10, The Final Verdict. As satisfying as the case had been, the real moment of justice came in court. Jeff, who had swaggered into his first interrogation full of arrogance, was a very different man when he stood before the judge. Gone was the smug attitude. Now he was just another con artist facing the consequences. The judge didn't hold back. Given Jeff's history of fraud and his complete disregard for the law, the sentencing was harsh. He and his crew wouldn't be running any more scams anytime soon. Linda, the HOA president, sat beside Daniel in the courtroom, nodding in approval as the verdict was read. "That's one less problem for the neighborhood." "No kidding," Daniel said as they left the courthouse. Tom clapped him on the shoulder. "Well, that was fun. You thinking about joining the real HOA now?" Daniel gave him a flat look. "Absolutely not." Tom laughed. "Can't blame you." With the scammers behind bars, the case officially closed, and his car safe from any more fake tickets, Daniel finally got back to his normal routine. That next Saturday morning, he sat on his porch, drinking his coffee, watching the quiet neighborhood. This time, there were no fake HOA cops lurking around, just peace. And that, he thought with a smirk, was real compliance. Epilogue, a new beginning. As the days turned into weeks, the neighborhood returned to its usual rhythm. The residents of Willow Creek felt a renewed sense of security, knowing that their police chief had their backs. Daniel, on the other hand, couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. He had not only taken down a group of scammers, but had also brought a sense of justice to his community. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, Daniel received a call from Linda. "Chief Harper, we've decided to hold a community meeting to discuss ways to prevent something like this from happening again. We'd love for you to join us." Daniel smiled. "I'll be there." As he hung up the phone, he looked out over the quiet streets of Willow Creek. It was a good town, filled with good people. And as long as he was around, he'd make sure it stayed that way. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story on Store of Good Stories. If this story touched your heart or made you think, don't forget to hit like and share the video to spread this positive message to more people. And if this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the meaningful stories we share every week. Your support is the biggest motivation for Store of Good Stories to keep bringing heartfelt and valuable stories to you. See you in the next video.